We are losing money in the economy. That's not good for anybody. Let's focus on that. Let's get our jobs done. I think people want to see the trains run on time. They want to see the airplanes run on time.
Right.
And that's something that we want to get back to. The sooner the better.
Señores, vaya espectáculo el que se vivió en el Capitolio. Los líderes republicanos MAGA están completamente fuera de sí, luego de que los demócratas hayan arrasado el pasado martes. Literalmente, amigos, están en modo crisis total, tratando de digerir lo que acaba de pasar. Y bueno, lo están haciendo de la peor manera posible. Hoy quiero mostrarles varios momentos que resumen perfectamente el caos y la negación dentro del Partido Republicano. Quiero que empecemos con el congresista MAGA Emmer. El tipo se puso filosófico y hasta dijo que el verdadero problema en Estados Unidos son las personas que creen que el gobierno puede resolver los grandes problemas o preocuparse por los pequeños. O sea, está atacando la idea de que el gobierno debería de ayudar a la gente. Escuchen esto.
Pro-terrorist Marxist radicals are now the left's mainstream. We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about. That is a direct quote from Kami Mamdani, and it should terrify every single freedom-loving American.
Luego aparece Steve Scalise, otro republicano MAGA, tratando de minimizar los resultados. Dice que no fue para tanto, ¿no? Que solo los estados azules votaron por azul. Y, amigos, es una mentira. ¿Por qué? Porque vimos cambios enormes, incluso en distritos y en condados que son tradicionalmente rojos, son republicanos, incluyendo en Georgia, ¿no? Pero bueno, dejemos que él se humille solo.
You know, when the speaker mentioned that, is it any surprise that last night blue states voted blue? We're talking Virginia, New Jersey, New York. By the way, none of those were swing states. You had 7 swing states in the election a year ago today. And by the way, we celebrate that a year ago today, Donald Trump was elected president of the United States.
Luego llega la congresista McClain, que aparece sacada directamente de un sketch, porque mientras Donald Trump se jacta de odiar al programa de SNAP, el de asistencia alimentaria, pues bueno, McClain intenta defenderlo. Y lo hace de la forma más absurda posible.
They've obstructed the American people's agenda, delayed millions of flights, and denied SNAP benefits for the hungry. And for what? Ask yourself, for what are the Democrats fighting for? Well, they're fighting for $1.5 trillion in new debt to fund health care for illegals and continue the wasteful spending.
Y es que, amigos, parece una parodia, pero es real, y yo creo que eso es lo más preocupante, ¿no? Entre tanto caos, aparece el senador republicano Mike Rounds. Bueno, para sorpresa de todos, tuvo un momento de lucidez. Reconoce que la economía no va bien, lo admite, que la gente quiere ver resultados reales, y lo dice con un tono sobrio. Escuchemos.
We are losing money in the economy. That's not good for anybody. Let's focus on that. Let's get our jobs done. I think people want to see the trains run on time. They want to see the airplanes run on time.
Right.
And that's something that we want to get back to. The sooner the better.
Y claro, amigos, no podía faltar la cereza del pastel. No podía faltar MAGA Mike Johnson, presidente de la Cámara. El tipo dio una de las peores conferencias de prensa hasta el momento. Se le nota lo aterrado, como si supiera, ¿no?, que está a punto de perder su cargo. Pero aún así, sigue obedeciendo al trumpismo sin cuestionar nada. En plena conferencia, dice que los republicanos son el partido de la asequibilidad. En serio, señores, así lo dijo.
The reason we're so enthusiastic about running next year is we have a real record to run on. Mamdani and Democrats want to talk about affordability? We love that subject. We love it. Look at the facts. I brought some this morning. It's the Republicans who are working every day to make life more affordable for working families. And it's not a talking point for us. We are delivering. After 4 long years of skyrocketing prices under the Biden administration, we had to take over. You don't flip a switch and reverse that overnight. It takes a while to work those policies out of the system and to get the new ones in. President Trump and Republicans are delivering results for the American people that they can see and feel.
Luego un periodista le pregunta si es que no cree que la culpa del desastre electoral viene por el cierre de gobierno, ¿no? Del cual su partido es directamente responsable. Y bueno, lo que responde es digno de enmascarar.
Look, I've spoken with the president about it. I reminded him, as I said this morning, this was not a surprise to us. I mean, blue states elected blue leaders. I mean, yeah, so what? I mean, it would have been a huge headline if we could have had an upset there, but that was to be expected. As Leader Scalise said, I mean, you know, if the three big elections yesterday would have been in, you know, Louisiana, Alabama, and Texas, you'd have a totally different narrative, right? Or name any red state. It just so happened that those were the blue states. That was the blue outcomes. That's what everybody expected. I don't read too much into that. Yes.
Luego le hacen la pregunta más importante. Si los demócratas logran aprobar una resolución limpia en el Senado para poder mantener el gobierno abierto, ¿prometerá que se va a permitir una votación para extender los subsidios de salud, los del Obamacare? Y bueno, MAGA Mike responde que no promete nada. En otras palabras, admite que ni siquiera están dispuestos a votar para proteger el seguro médico de los estadounidenses.
He's offered them a vote. You know what they told him in response? No, we need you to guarantee the outcome of that vote. Well, that's ridiculous. That can't be done. No, because we did our job, and I'm not part of the negotiation. The House did its job on September 19th. I'm not promising anybody anything. I'm going to let this process play out. I'll tell you what they wanted. I'll tell you what Schumer and Jeffries wanted. In fact, Chuck Schumer said it publicly and decried that Thune and I would not go in a back room with them and make a four corners agreement on Obamacare subsidies. And I said, there's no way. That it was never possible or appropriate.
Luego le preguntan sobre los aranceles globales de Donald Trump, ¿no? Recordemos que según la Constitución de los Estados Unidos, y eso lo expliqué en el anterior video, el poder de establecer impuestos o de regular el comercio pertenece en exclusivo al Congreso, no al presidente. Incluso vimos cómo estos jueces conservadores de la Corte Suprema, ¿no?, están diciendo que Trump se pasó de la raya. Pero claro, MAGA Mike insiste en que si el Ejecutivo se extralimitara, él haría algo al respecto. Claro, ¿no? Como si alguna vez se animara a enfrentarse al trumpismo.
Don't read too much into the questions. This is how the process works. I'm sure the court will look at this very carefully and deliberately as they do, and I expect that we'll have a majority of the court that says that this administration is doing what they have the legal authority to do. If I felt like the executive branch had overstepped its bounds on trade or on the tariffs or something, I would have stepped in. I mean, that's my job as the Speaker of the House over the legislative branch. I would have done it in my own way, to be candid. I would have gone to the president privately and said, hey, sir, enough. I think you're overstepped the bounds. Let's try to figure that out. I wouldn't have publicly had a big spat with him because it wouldn't have been necessary. But that conversation didn't happen because I believe that what he's done is well within the bounds. And so we'll see what the court does.
Más adelante, MAGA Mike asegura que los resultados del martes no fueron ninguna sorpresa, que ellos ya lo esperaban. Y sí, señores, hasta lo dice con cara seria.
It has been very interesting to us to see all the pundits trying to spin the results of the election on Tuesday. I just want to point out some simple facts here, and as usual, I try to be concise and give you the highlights here. But there's some things that we really need to point out. First, there were no surprises on Tuesday night. Okay, you had blue states and blue cities that voted blue, to the alarm of no one, to the surprise of no one. That was what was expected. It just so happened that New York and New Jersey and Virginia were the states that were in the national spotlight on Tuesday. If the tables had been turned and if the calendar had been different and you had 3 red states, we'd have an entirely different narrative that you all would be writing about. Don't lose the simple fact.
Cuando le preguntan sobre el aumento de los precios de los alimentos antes del Día de Acción de Gracias, responde que eso siempre pasa, que los precios de la comida siempre suben.
Yeah, but the USDA has reported, and all of the economists have shown, food prices always go up. There's an inflationary level that's built into grocery prices, but they're going up at a much slower pace. In other words, the economic policies, even though all the provisions of the Working Families Tax Cut have not yet been implemented, that's going to make a dramatic effect. It's going to be like jet fuel to the economy. We have all these pro-growth policies that will bring down costs, increase wages, increase jobs, and more access to the economic rung so that more people can climb up the ladder.
Una forma muy rara, ¿no?, de admitir que su promesa de bajar los precios desde el inicio fue una mentira. En otro momento, MAGA Mike acusa a los demócratas de hacer promesas falsas y de no cumplirlas. Cuando, bueno, hipócritamente, ¿no?, eso es exactamente lo que hace Trump todo el tiempo. Recuerden que él prometió que los precios bajarían desde el primer día, ¿no?, que resolvería todas las guerras en 24 horas.
If you run as a socialist, you run on a big list of false claims. You promise everything to everyone and you can't deliver. And if you were ever able to deliver, it will be to the great detriment of the very people that you lured in to vote for you.
Luego intenta restarle importancia a estas elecciones, diciendo que los resultados de mitad de periodo no significan nada.
Fourth point I just want to make in the aftermath of Tuesday is that off-year election results in isolated places are never indicative of the upcoming midterm election. Don't read too much into that. You shouldn't. If you do, you're going to miss it. The GOP is in excellent position to win big next year. And when I say I'm bullish about the midterms, we absolutely are. And there's a lot of reasons for that. This is not groundless optimism. It's based on facts. The reason we're in such a great position is because we are united. And while the Democrats engage in their emerging civil war, Republicans are going to continue to work and deliver for all the new voters that we brought into the party last fall in 2024. There was a true demographic shift in that election, as you know. Record number of Hispanic and Latino voters, Black and African American voters, Jewish voters, union workers, urban voters, young people. And while they say that there's this big swell of enthusiasm of young people based on what happened in New York City Tuesday night, I would give to you Exhibit A on our side. Maybe you're not noticing, but the Turning Point events at college campuses all around the country are setting records for attendance. You have hundreds of thousands of new young people weekly coming into the movement that are enthusiastic, young conservatives who are looking for truth, who believe in America's founding principles, and who want to be engaged. And they will be engaged in next year's midterms.
Pero a ver, amigos, lo que más lo tienen nervioso son estos nuevos datos que demuestran que los hispanos y los jóvenes están regresando al Partido Demócrata. Donald Trump y Abbott creían que podrían manipular los distritos en Texas, porque claro, pensaban que los latinos votarían por MAGA. Pero a ver, los números ahora dicen todo lo contrario. Y si las tendencias que vimos el martes se repiten en Texas, señores, podrían perder incluso sus bastiones republicanos. Y MAGA Mike, obviamente, intenta restarle importancia.
No, I do believe that the demographic shift that we were able to see and experience in the 2024 election will hold. I believe that large numbers of those new voters and these demographics that have not traditionally been with the Republican Party are with us.
Luego vuelve a mentir diciendo que la inflación ya está bajando, cuando a ver, los datos demuestran todo lo contrario.
American people that they can see and feel. To date, we've seen core inflation is nearing its lowest level in 4 years. Gas prices have fallen to a 4-year low. Prices for everyday goods continue to decline, and blue-collar workers are seeing the largest increase in wage growth in nearly 6 decades.
Luego, él mismo confiesa que todos los días tiene que dar una conferencia de prensa para decir la verdad, cuando bien sabemos que en realidad lo hace porque Trump lo obliga a salir cada mañana a humillarse públicamente con los errores del trumpismo.
I'm not surprised that people are misled because the entire mainstream media is out every day parroting the talking points of Chuck Schumer. I have to go do a press conference every morning just to try to put the truth out there, the simple truth that is not changing. It sounds repetitive to us, but that's what it takes to try to saturate.
Not from 6 to 9 here, Mr. Speaker. We're not parroting.
I know.
Y bueno, por si faltaba un poco más, vuelve a defender los aranceles comprobados que son ilegales de Trump, ignorando por completo que incluso estos jueces que son conservadores dijeron que eso es algo inconstitucional. Pero claro, MAGA Mike repite que si él viera algo malo, haría algo, cuando todos sabemos que no hará nada.
I'm cheering for the president that the executive will win on this. Now, I say that as a jealous guardian of the legislative branch of government, Article 1. There's a reason we're listed first in the Constitution. This is supposed to be the place of greatest importance. We're the ones that are supposed to make the law and the policy. But we do give the executive traditionally a lot of leeway, a lot of discretion over international trade. And we had a serious problem in this country for decades. As you all know, and you've discussed many times, we had a big trade disparity. The president stepped in. I think he's used that authority appropriately. He's obviously created a lot of leverage for our trade strategy internationally, and it's yielded great results. And so I'm watching that carefully because I'm the guardian of the Article 1 branch of government. But I think he's well within the lines, and I hope that a majority of the justices agree, because if they reverse all this, it would really be chaos in the markets and in the economy. It'd be a real problem for the country.
Señores, todo este circo sería hasta cómico si es que no fuera tan grave. Los republicanos MAGA están viviendo su propio colapso interno. Están negando los resultados. Están mintiendo sobre la economía. Y claro, están obedeciendo ciegamente a Donald Trump. Mientras tanto, pues bueno, el país sigue pagando las consecuencias. Y señores, adivinen, porque la obsesión de Donald Trump con Rusia, al parecer no ha terminado. Ahora está impulsando una nueva investigación completamente política contra el exdirector de la CIA, contra John Brennan, el mismo que ayudó a exponer la injerencia rusa en las elecciones del año 2016. Lo más grave no es en sí la investigación, sino lo que revela sobre el poder y este resentimiento, ¿no?, que tiene Donald Trump. Un intento muy descarado por reescribir la historia y por último hasta vengarse de quienes se atrevieron a cuestionarlo. Para ponerles el contexto rápido de esa situación, Donald Trump sigue muy convencido de que el caso de Rusia pues fue una conspiración en su contra, ¿no? Y ahora su entorno está presionando al Departamento de Justicia una vez más. Al parecer no le bastó con el exdirector del FBI, con James Comey, no le bastó contra Letitia James, la fiscal de Nueva York, y ahora quiere señalar y reabrir a un viejo fantasma, directamente contra el exdirector de la CIA, contra John Brennan. Para los que no lo recuerdan, es quien dirigió la CIA durante Obama, prácticamente, y bueno, como parte de una supuesta trama, ¿no?, para violar los derechos civiles. Según ellos, hubo una conspiración entre agencias de inteligencia para sabotear a Trump. Claramente no existe ninguna evidencia, ¿no?, que lo respalde, pero bueno, eso a ellos no le importa. Veamos de qué se trata.
So the fact of this investigation is not new. It was actually announced by the White House over the summer, and it was reported that Pam Bondi had initiated it pursuant to a criminal referral from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Remember when Gabbard had a news conference and said she had uncovered evidence of a treasonous conspiracy, including President Obama and others? That's what this is partially about. And it's just, I got to tell you, I'm not sure in my own mind right now whether the folks that articulate the theory of this case actually believe this stuff, or whether this is just a technique designed to punish their perceived enemies. But here's what people familiar with this case, here's how they describe it. They essentially describe it as a long-running conspiracy to violate Donald Trump's civil rights that began with the Russia investigation back in the first Trump administration, continued through the through the Biden administration, and persists to this day. Otherwise, it must persist in some way. Otherwise, the statute of limitations would have lapsed on these charges. And so they link together both the Russia investigation and the Jack Smith probes. And because the reason it's down in South Florida, that was new. That's what we reported today. It's being led by the U.S. Attorney in Miami, is because the Mar-a-Lago search took place in that district. And so that's the criminal nexus, we are told. And Jason Quinones, the U.S. Attorney down there, is an associate, a friend, we're told, of Mike Davis, who's an advisor to the Justice Department in the White House, who's been talking very publicly about what he thinks should happen and his vision of this case. Again, a conspiracy against rights. flights, as he puts it, involving multiple people across administrations. The issue, of course, as everyone on this panel well knows, is there's no evidence to support any of this. You described how John Durham, who not exactly a friendly prosecutor to the targets in these cases, looked thoroughly at these matters and was not able to charge anyone. And there's been no new evidence that's surfaced since, even though there's been attempts by Trump administration figures to suggest that newly declassified evidence, casts aspersions on certain things. But that's fantasy. So it's really going to be interesting to see exactly how this proceeds and whether this case ever gets past any grand jury, whether in Florida or somewhere else. But what we do know and what we have reported today is that they are preparing to issue a series of subpoenas, some of which ask questions about the 2017 intelligence assessment, which, again, has been parsed over and over, and no wrongdoing has been found. And, in fact, I reported at the time on the Durham investigation and the pain that CIA officers, for example, had to go through. They had to hire lawyers and go through rigorous questioning by prosecutors, something that no CIA officer wants to experience. And at the end of the day, as you said, John Durham published a report in 2023, didn't lay a glove on that assessment, didn't impugn it in any way. He was critical of the FBI, but not of the CIA. So where this thing goes is perplexing to all of us, but that's the state of play as I understand it.
Ken, let me do two things. John Ratcliffe, now the head of the CIA, ordered another assessment, and that assessment also corroborates the actual intelligence, nitpicks some of the tradecraft, and then John Durham distorts those findings. And that's some of the intel referral that they talk about when they talk about a referral being made to DOJ. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There was an appendix of the Durham report that was declassified. But I think the way Trump officials have characterized this evidence is just not right. This is very complicated, but it has to do with some evidence that some emails that suggested that the Clinton team was essentially trying to put out the story of Trump-Russia collusion, but Durham himself concluded that these emails were fakes. They were concocted, possibly by Russian intelligence. But that's not how they were described by Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe. And it just doesn't seem to be on the level. And you're right, the Ratcliffe assessment that he ordered up, it was very careful to say that it was not criticizing the overall conclusion by the CIA and other intelligence agencies that Russia interfered in the 2016 election and did so in a way that seemed designed to help Donald Trump. It had other sort of lesser criticisms of John Brennan and whether he was putting his thumb on the scale, which John Brennan hotly disputes. But yeah, that's what you're saying is accurate.
So, Andrew Weissman, viewers of this program have been covering this story since before you were available to talk to viewers, to me, or share all of your brilliance with our viewers because you were inside the Mueller probe. And so they'll be familiar with these names, but let me just underscore them. Marco Rubio, now Donald Trump's at least one cabinet position. He used to have two, but he's at least the Secretary of State. He might also still be the National Security Advisor. He was the chairman of a committee that he, as a senator, described as this way, quote, "No probe into this matter has been more exhaustive." John Durham, this was like the Wright's Robert Mueller without any courtroom success, without any actual accomplishments, a single plea deal from a low-level FBI lawyer. And then John Ratcliffe. And if he sounds familiar, it's because he worked in an intel job in 1.0. He's back as the head of the CIA in 2.0. And when he got back, when Trump won and wanted to resurrect this, he had the CIA review all these things that Marco Rubio and John Durham already reviewed. And this is what the CIA, under Ratcliffe, under the emboldened Trump 2.0 found, quote, "The ICA demonstrated strong adherence to tradecraft standards. This level of analytic rigor exceeded that of..."
Ok, amigos, esto es una muestra perfecta de cómo Donald Trump sigue queriendo manipular esta narrativa, ¿no? Convertir sus derrotas en persecuciones políticas. Lo que hacen sus aliados, incluyendo hasta exfuncionarios y, claro, voceros y lo que sea dentro del Departamento de Justicia, es tomar una investigación legítima, como la de Rusia, porque claro, fue legítima, sí existió, y transformarla en una historia de victimización. Dicen que la CIA, que el FBI y que Obama estaban confabulados para destruirlo. Pero a ver, amigos, una preguntita, ¿dónde están las pruebas? Ni siquiera John Durham, que fue el designado expresamente por el propio Trump para poder investigar todo eso, encontró un solo delito. Y eso recordemos que incluso los propios republicanos lo reconocieron. El problema es que Donald Trump no necesita pruebas. Él lo que necesita es un enemigo. Y bueno, el exdirector de la CIA y crítico público de su presidencia, ahora es el blanco perfecto, ¿no? Para poder mantener viva esa narrativa de Donald Trump contra el Estado profundo. Además, lo que se está haciendo aquí, a ver, va en contra de las propias normas del Departamento de Justicia, porque anunciar una investigación o hasta filtrar citaciones, tal y como lo están haciendo en este momento, ya de entrada es una violación directa a las reglas internas tanto del Departamento de Justicia como del FBI. No solo eso, porque el hecho de que estén llevando este caso en el estado de Florida y no en Washington, D.C., que es donde trabajó este exdirector de la CIA, eso ya es una maniobra política. A eso se le llama forum shopping, que es básicamente elegir el lugar donde más te conviene porque vas a tener un juez favorable, que es lo que hicieron, por ejemplo, contra Letitia James, que no supieron cómo empezarlo porque sabían que ningún juez iba a lograr esa investigación y lo hicieron en Virginia, donde tenían una jueza que era favorable. Probablemente será la jueza Cannon, recordemos, la cual ya ha demostrado simpatía por Trump en el pasado, eso tómelo por seguro. Entonces, no hablamos de justicia, ¿no? Una vez más hablamos de persecución montada para distraer, castigar y reescribir la historia. Y si alguien todavía cree que esto es una simple diferencia política, ¿no? Solo basta con recordar que todas las investigaciones oficiales, incluso bajo gobiernos republicanos, concluyeron lo mismo. Rusia sí intervino en las elecciones del 2016. Y lo hizo para ayudar a Donald Trump, así de simple. Pero bueno, la pregunta que queda es, ¿hasta qué punto puede un presidente seguir utilizando, ¿no?, el poder para vengarse de quienes lo investigaron? ¿Ustedes creen que esto es una persecución política o será un intento por tapar los errores del pasado? Los leo en los comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.